Oh my God. Oh my God. Wow. Did you know that every state in the US produces wine? Hey, this is Sommelier André Hueston Mack, and I'm gonna be tasting wine from every single state in the US. Today is part 1, Alabama through Missouri. Did you know that you can actually find wine in Alaska, Hawaii? And that's kind of why I'm excited today. These aren't generally wines that I would work with and or regions that I'm familiar with. But that's what's really exciting about wine to me is that you can't know everything. And I'm sure that there's lots of things that I don't know about these wines or where they come from, but I'm eager to taste them. All right, our first state, Alabama. This is Morgan Creek Vineyards, the Regal Red. This actually looks like the Crimson Tide. Ooh, I'm a little afraid. I'm sorry to say, I'm a little, smells slightly sweet, ripe. I never really had anything like that. You know, it's pretty interesting. I guess the first thing I didn't realize is that it was gonna be sweet. Not like a port sweet in that way. It does have some acidity to it. I can't talk right now just because the sides of my tongue are tingling, I'm salivating. It also has like kind of like a sherry quality to it too. It's slightly nutty in a way. The sweetness in this wine is due to stopping the fermentation, so there is some residual sugar left in the wine. This wine is from Alabama, geographically very different than like say a place like France or California. It is a lot warmer there. The warmer it is, the riper the fruit. Ripe fruit means more sugars. This is actually a muscadine grape, and muscadine is the grape species that is native to North America. A lot of the wines that we probably will taste today are sweet wines, right? Local wine is made to go with the local food, and Pacific regions are making wines for those specific taste palettes. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm not sure that I would drink this every single day, but it's just kind of cool to know that it's out there and kind of fun. Next state is Alaska. This is blueberry wine. So you can make wine from any fruit. Just so happens that what's most popular in the world that I come from is grapes, but wine can be made from even flowers as well. But this is made from blueberries, which I've never had before. Oh my God. It smells like blueberries somewhat, but then like underneath that, there's kind of like this little bit of like pine sol, kind of disinfectant that like is kind of mixed in there with that. It smells like a sterile hospital room. You know, it's kind of one of those things the first time like you have beer or like liquor or something like that. Oh, you know, don't worry about it, Sonny. You got to get used to it. I don't know if I could ever get used to this. There's not a lot of complexity to the wine and it feels a lot of, you know, pretty one-dimensional. I've actually had a loss of words. I just wouldn't drink this. I'm sorry. You know, that's like no disrespect. Making wine is science, but also it's an art. The science part tells you, hey, grapes don't grow well here. What else could we do? And as an artist, you say, what else could we plant here? So if blueberries thrive there, then how about making a little bit of blueberry wine? So here's to artistry. Next state, Arizona. Oh, look at that color, dark, rich color there. I'm familiar with wines from Arizona. The sandy soils are kind of very similar to rocky and sandy soils in the Rhone, the south of France. So they tend to be, you know, stylistically almost kind of the same, but a little bit more rounder, rich, and slightly exaggerated. And that's all due to, you know, its proximity to the equator. It's just a lot hotter there. This smells like a little bit of clove, cinnamon, a little chocolate covered cherry. It does smell like a furry animal. I mean that in a great way. I think every time I say something like this, I think that you guys think that I'm like full of shit, but like it does kind of smell like petting my mother-in-law's dog, you know? Kind of short finish. I actually taste a little bit caramelized in a way. And maybe that's due to heat. Getting a lot of like tingling sensation in the front part of my teeth. There's like cherries, pomegranates. There's a slight kind of like acetone to this wine, which I kind of see as a fault. I think for some people, they've embraced it as a style and people enjoy it, but it's kind of hard for me to sometimes to get past that in a wine. Maybe that's something that developed, you know, in this particular vintage, but I would definitely give it a shot next vintage and see how it turned out. Arizona, what's interesting about this is that they chose to plant what we call the noble grape. So the grape species that are more indigenous to Europe, and they found a place in Arizona, this microclimate that they felt that these grape varietals would do well. When you think of something like muscadine, those are a different species of grape that are native to North America. Next state, Arkansas. So this is Chateau Ozark. This is from the Ozark Mountains, and this is called Savant. Arkansas white table wine. So that's interesting because as you look at it, it looks like it is red. So I don't know the law here, but clearly it doesn't look white, but it is listed as a white table wine. It smells, you know, musky. You know, I think it's muscadine. It's kind of the culprit there. There's some vanilla component to it, a little bit of cinnamon. It tastes like caramelized sugar if you were to burn cotton candy. That's what it kind of tastes like to me. That's not a good thing. If it's your thing, then it's a good thing. It's not my thing. So, and definitely I wasn't expecting that. Feels like it's like part wine and, part mead. So like made from honey. So it has like this musky thickness to it, but not very cloying. I am salivating, so I feel like there is some acidity to it, but it needs food. Like, I don't think most people could actually drink a full glass of this. It's like a liquefied fruit cake. When you see muscadine, I'm starting to realize maybe there's some sweetness to the wine. It's slightly matterized or like burnt a little bit in some way. Next state, California. All right, so we have BV Vineyards. This is Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, one of the most famous wine regions in the world. So when people generally think about wine in the United States or talking about wine in the United States, this is what we're talking about right here. First off, kind of campfire smokiness to it. Raspberries, violets, just a little bit of hint of cranberry. Really rich tannins, bitter chocolate, cassis, raspberries. This is a classic example of California Cabernet. It has concentration. Some of the earlier wines or fruit wines we tasted didn't have this depth of concentration to it and like this kind of depth of flavor that kind of keeps going and keeps going. Here there's some complexity to it and a little bit more elegance to it as well. This is like a warm hug. This is something that I know and that I embrace and that I'm most comfortable with. California is the standard bearer here. Between 80% and 90% of all wine produced in the United States is produced in California. It is one of the largest states in America, and with that comes, a diversity in climate. So you can plant all different types of grapes, and in particular for wine, it has like this really great soil content, microclimates, but also it abuts the Pacific Ocean. You want hot days so the grapes can ripen phenolically, but also you want cool nights so the wines can retain some type of acidity. And California is really kind of great for that. Next state, Colorado. So this is Brookcliff Vineyards Malbec 2020. I'm looking at that color, very dark, kind of deep purplish hue. So it looks like Malbec to me. Roasted meat, blackberries, lots of vanilla. Would attribute that to maybe its oak regiment. And a little bit of black pepper. I like the way that the wine flows. It is, pretty refined for Malbecs in general. The tannins are pretty well integrated. I'm a little taken aback because of a little bit of the sharpness of the alcohol in it. But all in all, I think it's a well-made wine of consequence. I was like, all right, we're going to taste a Colorado wine today. Cool. And then when I looked at it, it said Malbec, and I kept thinking to myself, like, okay, the highest elevation wines in the world actually come from Argentina, and Colorado is known as, a high altitude. Malbec thrives there in high elevation. Why wouldn't it thrive in Colorado? Next state, Connecticut. All right, this is called Stonington Seaport White. This is a blend of Chardonnay and Vidal Blanc. This smells kind of fresh. It smells slightly soapy, not in a bad way, like a little bit of potpourri, green apple, and then like maybe a little peach pit. Wow, yeah, really peachy. There's some acidity to it, but it's not overly acidic, just enough to like it feels very fresh and lively. And then it's got like this really kind of sturdy base. It has like structure to it, and maybe that comes from the Chardonnay. This is actually rather enjoyable. So this is in Stonington, right there on the coast. It's hot enough for the grapes to ripen, but it's like cool enough like to have the wines have like some type of crisp and freshness to it. Cool climate Chardonnay tends to be like more apples and pear flavors, but cooler climates, tend to have lead with like less fruit. This wine is an example of that. It has fruit, but it's not overripe. It has a little bit of like the sweetness to it. I like this wine. Next state, Delaware. This is Salted Vines. This is like potpourri jumping out of the glass, cotton candy. I definitely think it's going to be sweet. Muscat gummies. I refer to this all the time. I'm not real sure if everybody's ever had them. They're like gummy bears, but grape flavored. This is what that smells like to me. It's sweet, not thick sweet in any type of way. It's not good. It's not my favorite. At least that's what I tell my children to say. It tastes pretty flabby. Flabby just means the wine has no acid. There's no spring to it. It doesn't feel fresh or like lively in any way. The aftertaste in my mouth is kind of like after like you taste like Robitussin. This is not like anything I've ever had before. It's aromatics, but then also like this funkiness that comes maybe from the grape to me is just a little bit too overpowering. Something that I can't get past in order to be able to enjoy the wine. All right, so I want to break down a little something for you that most people may not understand. Not all wine grapes are produced in the state in which they are made. You can produce wine from grapes in Delaware that were actually grown from another state. In particular, this wine, the grapes were grown in Pennsylvania, and then they brought them to their winery in Delaware, and the wine was produced there, made there. Here, I think that, what we have to really understand is that it's from Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania and Delaware are adjoining states. So, when we talk about terroir doesn't really, encounter, state lines or anything like that. So it's still regional. So next state, Florida. This is called Orange Sunshine, and this is made with real oranges. I've never had a wine made from oranges. I would have to say that this is probably the one that I had the most energy about. I don't know if that was nervous energy or excitement energy or anything like that, but this is the one that I was most interested in experiencing. This smells more like orange zest than when I think about an orange. It smells like something I should probably wear or dab instead of something that I should drink. It tastes kind of like if a Sunny D could ever go bad. I don't know if Sunny D could ever go bad. I think they stayed in the refrigerator for years. Really rich and slightly artificially orange, like a Sunny D. This is weird. I mean, it's just a weird kind of experience. Then again, not all that bad. I would use this to make a cocktail with. I couldn't drink a full glass of this, but I think the best way to probably enjoy this to me would be by adding some vodka or gin to it. Next state, Georgia. So this is Curry Heat Vineyard. This is a muscadine. Ooh, man, this smells like some artificial candy I had when I was a kid. It smells like Bubblicious, like chewing gum. It's very fruity, fragrant. It tastes like potpourri. It's musky. This is muscadine. It reminds me of the first wine that we tasted from Alabama, which was also a muscadine wine. It's bright. It's got a lot of fruit and flavor to it, but all of it tastes very artificial, and then a hint of there's this cologne to it that doesn't really make it very pleasurable to drink. Next state, Hawaii. So this is called Maui Blanc, and guess what? It's made from pineapples. This is the part that I feel that it's really funny. I'm really laughing inside. I'm trying to hold it in. Generally, when you see people taste wine or talk about wine, they talk about all these things that actually aren't in the wine. Oh yeah, this Chardonnay has lots of tropical fruit. What I'm really getting up front is pineapple. But there's actually no pineapple in that wine that they're talking about because it's made from Chardonnay. In this wine, I smell pineapple because it's actually pineapple in it. Very clean, very fresh, and not dull from a can. This is fresh pineapple. So this is the interesting thing about this wine, is that it's not sweet at all. This tastes like, a Central Coast from California, tropical kind of Chardonnay without any texture or body to it. Almost kind of slightly feels watered down, not rich or sweet or anything like that. And maybe that's really what I was expecting. But this is pleasant. It's refreshing. It seems to be well made, of quality. In the category of all the fruit wines I tasted today, I would have to say this is probably the best one. Next state, Idaho. So this is Saint Chapelle. This is Muscat Blanc. And this is called Open Air. Smells like muscat to me. It's very fruit forward, pears, peaches. It's pretty light, but not in a bad way. It's kind of a weird minerality in it. And almost tastes like a jalapeno, actually. Less with the heat, but more of that flavor. It's really strange in a way. There's no texture to this wine. It doesn't feel like there's layers, not a lot of flavor. I don't think it's a bad wine, but it definitely seems to fall short and be somewhat flabby. There's no zipper zing. It's just blah on your palate. It's not lively in any way. Next state, Illinois. And this is made with a grape called Chambourcin. Really dark kind of violet color here. Chambourcin, I've never had it before. I think I just learned how to say it about 20 seconds ago. So this is a French hybrid grape, and all that means it's that one of its parents is from Europe and other parents is here from the United States. They make these grapevines that are really kind of resistant to pesticides and disease, and generally speaking, phylloxera. This looks really interesting. It smells funny enough, blueberries and raspberries. Very kind of fruit forward, almost like what we like to call Kool-Aid-esque. There's some pepper, black peppercorn that I'm getting. So there's a spicy element to it. Seems pretty light body, very short finish. Seems like it really kind of dissipated and I hadn't drank anything. It doesn't feel really complex. It's not really giving much off the nose or even, expressing any type of layers of flavors on the palate. Feels like a medium body wine that's a cross between Merlot and Syrah. There's not concentration in this wine. There's not a depth of flavors or anything like that. So it doesn't really feel like it's of quality. I'd love to taste other versions of this at, various price points just to kind of get a better idea and grasp on it. But like, it's kind of cool. Next state, Indiana. So this is called Holtkamp. This is Trebinette. It definitely has a kind of a spicy kind of smell to it right away. Like when I smell Gewürztraminer. That kind of makes sense. Gewürztraminer is one of the parent grapes. So this smells kind of like a little bit of pineapple, nectarine, a little bit of kind of grassy notes to it. So I wasn't expecting it to be sweet. I think that was a pleasant surprise. What I was dreading is that it would be like fermented completely dry and then not have any acid or any texture or layer to it. This is pretty fun. It's a little bit of pineapple. There's peach and nectarine there, a wet rock, or like stone fruit too. It's interesting if you look at its parent, Gewürztraminer is generally found in Germany and Alsace, so colder regions. So, it tends to do well in those environments. And so I would think that it would do well in Indiana as well. This is actually said it was bottled in a town called New Alsace in Indiana. And I think that kind of backs up the fact of, immigrants moving to the United States, planning what they know from back home. And so it makes sense that they would choose Gewürztraminer here. Even the name suggests that they might be from Germany or from Alsace, and probably is the reason why they chose this particular grape and why I'm a fan of it. All right, next state, Iowa. So this is Wide River, and this is Calt Red-Handed. So this is a Cabernet, and I think there's a local grape, a native grape called Petite Pearl, which I have no familiarity with. Very fruity. There's some earthiness to it. I smell a little bit of mushrooms, kind of like a rich kind of cherry component to it. This is kind of really light-bodied. There's no mid-palate. It feels like there's really nothing there. It tastes like Kool-Aid, like flavored water. Not much nuance to it. Kind of disappointing in a way, where I think in all the regions in southern France that the wine reminded me of, and then when I tasted, there's like really nothing there. I would assume that Iowa's a really tough place to grow wine just because of hot summers that, bring on disease, but also, cool climate, which kills plants and grapes. If you wanted to just smell your wine, this is a great example of that, but if you wanted to drink it, not so much. So very promising on the nose, disappointing on the palate. Next state, Kansas. This is Grace Hill Winery, and this is called Peckerhead Red. It smells like muscadine. So these are all native grapes. There's Concord, Chambourchin, and Norton. I don't think I've ever had this combination before. It smells very potpourri, very perfumed. But wow, it is pretty sweet. Yeah, this tastes like grape flavored wine, right? If you were drinking like a wine cooler or something like that. So it feels very fruity up front, very jammy. It's not like a dessert wine that has like layers and intensity to it or anything like that. This is just sweet and then not sweet once you finish it. Quality-wise, it feels all really put together, but man, I can't get over the sweetness. I can't even have a full glass of this, but this wine isn't made for me, and that's quite all right. Next state, Kentucky. So this is a Cabernet from a winery called Pocatera. This is just labeled as American Cabernet Sauvignon and no vintage. This looks like Cabernet, looks dark, kind of has the color characteristics that associate with California. Right off the bat, it smells like cherry cola to me. I would say it's pretty thin for a Cabernet. It almost tastes slightly hot, so high in alcohol. There's no weight to it. There's nothing to it. It feels like a light body Cabernet. There's definitely that reoccurring thing of like the canned green beans, which sometimes means that the grapes were harvested too early or they're young vines. It's probably cropped at a high yield. When we talk about yield, it's like how many grapes that you can grow on an acre. And the more that you grow on an acre, the less concentrated the wine will be, but you get a bigger yield, but like less flavorful fruit. A lot of the decisions that you make in the vineyard are based on cost. Some people drop fruit where they go through and cut fruit off because it's too much and you want to concentrate the fruit that's still hanging on the vines, which is a very expensive process to do. In some places, people just think that from a business standpoint, it's just outright crazy. I didn't even know that they made Cabernet in Kentucky. This probably wasn't the best shining example of that, but maybe there's one that exists. Next state, Louisiana. So this is Landry Vineyards, Blanc de Bois. This is another hybrid here, but high heat and humidity foster diseases. That's why they use hybrids here. It's white wine, but it's more golden than most. That tells me maybe that the wine is a little bit older. It almost smells a little bit like a banana peel, a little bit of cardamom, and then a little bit of kind of citrus oil. almost stony and minerally. It almost kind of has like a slight tinge of like butterscotch to it. And that can mean that it's been in the bottle old, or during some of the aging process, it was exposed to air. I was expecting this wine to be sweet. I'm pleasantly surprised that it's not. Actually, not bad not bad at all. And it really reminds me of some of the wines in the Jura in France. Definitely different climate styles, but that kind of oxidative, minerally style white wines. It's shocking to me how much this wine reminds me of wines from that particular area. I'm definitely intrigued by this wine. This really tastes like something from the Jura, and that has me excited to want to share that with my fellow geeks. Next state, Maine. So this is Dragonfly Farm and Winery, and this is apple table wine. So this is not apple cider, this is apple wine. So this is taking apples and fermenting them the same way that we would ferment grapes and going through that process to make wine. That petulance and the kind of like that prickliness that you get in apple cider comes from a different type of fermentation. You know, this is interesting because I don't smell any apple on it. I think there's a slight hint of something that smells like fruit, like pear. But the overall smell and the thing that just whiffs right in the glass is fingernail polish remover. It has a really like nutty finish. Nuts and apples, you know, people serve that all the time, but I don't think that was the intention here. I don't like this one. Next state, Maryland. So this is the 2019 Bordy Vineyards Albarino. Albarino is a grape that's indigenous to Spain. So kind of fresh, lively, grown on a coast. Let's see what Maryland has to offer. I'm familiar with the grape. I'm not familiar with the region. So I'm a little bit excited, but also a little scared. Like, I don't know what to expect. Color looks a little dark. No, outside it just tells you that it has some bottle maturity. It smells fresh. It smells like salted air. That is not what I was expecting. You know what it tastes like when you leave a bottle of wine open? It tastes almost cooked. There were some people in Oregon, a producer, who had spent like 3 years before they ended up in Oregon because they did all this research around the country to figure out the best place to grow Albarino. There's a lot of research that goes into it. I don't know if this was backed by research and saying, hey, this could grow there. I can see why they would want to. Like, you know what I mean? Like thinking about like growing, you know, the local wine to go with the food. So if I think about Maryland, you know, I'm thinking about fish, crustaceans, seafood, like all of those things that Albarino tend to like help sing. This not so much. Next state, Massachusetts. So this is from Truro Vineyards. This is called Diamond White. We have to talk about this bottle real quick. Look at this. It's shaped like a lighthouse. It looks pretty cool to me. Then again, I'm a sucker for packaging and stuff like that on the business side. But this is made from the Concord grape, which is like generally used to make like grape jams and jellies. And also this is one of those examples where the grapes are actually grown in New York, but it's produced and bottled in Massachusetts. So it's sweet. I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking that it would be dry. So that kind of like threw me off. It's not like over the top sweet, but like there's definitely something missing there. It doesn't feel complete. It like kind of dies right in the mid palate. There's nothing on the back end of this wine. Not necessarily my style, but I can see how people could be attracted to it. It seems like easy to knock back. If this is what you like, then that's all the power to you. Next state, Michigan. So this is called 42 Ice Wine. This is made from Vidal Blanc. This is ice wine, which falls into like that kind of dessert wine category, so a sweet wine. What that is that the grapes are left on the vine until they freeze. And so it concentrates the juice, makes it sweeter, and then they quickly crush them, and then that's how the sweetness comes into the wine. Very concentrated, and generally they come in half bottles, right? Because most people can't drink a full bottle or it would go to waste. Ah, that smells amazing. Like stewed peach, pear, Mirabelle plum. There's lots of things going on. Like texture, I feel like it drapes over my tongue and my palate. It's like got my tonsils like on a speed bag. When I thought about sweet wine, this was the category of wine that I talked about, where it had texture and this richness and these layers to it. And also I feel like texture gives wine a soul, right? It gives like a feeling, and these wines definitely do that. This is something that I know and something that feels very familiar to me. And going in today, this is what I thought all of the sweet wines would taste like, and they don't. And so that's a great learning point for me. These wines are great. If you've never had ice wine, it's definitely something you should try, and definitely can just be, you know, a fun way to end a meal, whether it be with dessert or cheese or just by itself. This is pretty cool to know that they're making ice wine there, and this is pretty tasty. All right, next state, Minnesota. So this is from Schramm Vineyard, and this is called Itasca. It's my first time having a wine from Minnesota. Ooh. So it's a funk there. It smells dry. I guess like from smelling, I think that it would, you know, that it's not going to be sweet. It's really golden in color, especially for 2021. Wow, that is that's pretty strong. It's pretty powerful. Well, I just wasn't expecting that. It has some tannin to it, and it's peppery, right? So it's got like this white pepper thing to it. This is weird. I don't think I've ever had the grape before. It feels pretty hearty. You know, it's not polished. It's big and rough around the edges. It's got like my cheek spasming over here. I don't know what to think of this wine. This is definitely not a flavor that I'm accustomed to or feels enjoyable to me. And there's no complexity to it. Like, it's kind of one-dimensional. Like, you get like this rush of like alcohol and like this heaviness and almost like this, like you've tasted cologne in your mouth, and then it like that, it's gone. Next state, Mississippi. This is from R&R Vineyards, and this is Lamonto. I never heard of that Lamonto before. I thought it was a cuvee name, and apparently it's a grape. Yeah, you know how I look at this? It's like very dark, very purpley looking. When I smell it, it smells like that Muscat grape. When I smell that, I automatically know that it is a hybrid grape or a native grape. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Syrah, just like kind of like off the first whiff. Some spice here, some like a pepper spice mix. It's kind of tannic, so it is sucking the moisture out of my mouth. There's really no fruit in the wine, which just seems kind of strange and weird to me. There is this fruitiness that you get on the nose that really kind of falls flat on the palate. It doesn't feel complete. It's like missing something. You're hearing lots of like rumbling. It's about, this is a movement called ABV, anything but vinifera. A lot of eager wine drinkers are championing those wines and the taste of those wines. So do I think, in the next 50 years, will these be more popular? Yes. And I would have to say within the last 10 years, they're more popular. The noble grapes have been grown and have a lot more history of like being worked with that come from Europe. Here in the United States, it's relatively young, our experience with grapes, but I do think that some of the better known best practices will create better wines. And through experience, you're going to see a lot of that kind of spill over into other parts of the United States where they're making wine. It's really going to flourish. I think these won't be so obscure, and someone in my position, 30, 40 years from now, within that repertoire, they're definitely going to be talking about native grapes. All right, our last wine for part one is the great state of Missouri. So this is Augusta Winery, and this is Norton. Oh, right off the bat, just really kind of deep, dark color, rich color, very purpley. So it smells very jammy. It's smoky. It has a little bit of residual sugar, but like really kind of faint. Jammy, spicy. There's some tannin to it. To be honest, it tastes better than I thought it would taste. I guess if I had to compare this to the other Nortons that we've tasted today, it's better made than those. There's this kind of substance to it that you get, even though I would say that this is a medium body and doesn't have this kind of lush quality to it. I still think that it's well made. I never think of Missouri as being like, a wine destination at all, but I do believe the first AVA was conceived and is in Missouri. To me, that's kind of a big deal to show like maybe where things have shifted. To think that was the first place that we decided to incorporate an AVA. I'm always fascinated by that. All right, that was the end of part one. What a great tasting, really fun, I think really informational for me. A job as a sommelier is not only to know like just the wines that you like and enjoy, but also to know what other things are out there. But coming soon will be part two, and we'll be tasting wines from Montana all the way to Wyoming. This is kind of cool. This is definitely not what I was expecting when I opened it. Actually, I was slightly afraid, just like looking at the overall packaging. When I looked at this a little bit, I was like, oh, this looks like it's kind of been printed off a home printer. It's just a prime example that, just by looking at the packaging, like really doesn't tell you anything about inside.